So we're back today, and we're going to continue our discussion about relationships because it is so important. Relationships, aren't they? Whether it's with family or friends, or especially a partner, spouse, how do we make them work? And that's the big question. Like, what makes them work? And I want to go back, I think, to the very first day when I started this series, and I shared a quote by I have it right here. Oh, I'm sorry, by Aristotle. And it says, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And the more I read that, and I read it every day because I have it right by here, it makes so much sense to me. And the other quote that I live by and love is by Michelangelo. And he said at age 80, he goes, "I am still learning." And I think that's true for all of us. The more that we can be open and teachable and keep learning, that wisdom's going to keep growing in us. So I think that's really special to remember. I bet you have a favorite quote. I'd love to know what it is, because I like to learn what motivates other people, what kind of quotes. And hi, Sherry. Good to see you here. Always good to see you here. So I have my notes here because I want to make sure that I cover this, because I think, like I said, relationships is where how we express ourselves in life, especially if we're in our default mode, which I think on Monday I'm going to talk about default versus living on purpose, because I think that's really key in our life. Is when we are living by default and we haven't had any awarenesses or aha moments or changes, and we're living in our fears and our insecurities and our locked up paradigms in our minds, we're living almost robotically in some ways, because that's all we know to do, right? And it could be a lot of good things, could be neutral things, and it could be in ways in which really hold us back or hurt us. And when we find somebody that we think we connect with, and we think we're falling in love, and then we want to make that serious a commitment, we know that true commitment and true love involves trust and respect and a generosity of self. And those are all a part of love. Now, some people who live in this default mode, who are seeking to fill those holes of never having been enough and not been loved enough by their parents, and they have these wounds inside them, they can tend to be people who gravitate toward those that make them feel wonderful, like, oh, they make me feel great, and they look good on my arm, and I love being in love. I love the feeling. And when that feeling wears off in time, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever, and it will, usually within the third or fourth year, it's when that initial feeling, because they equate love to a feeling, and it is partly that, for sure, but when that's all that is, and it starts to wear off, and familiarity begins, and everyday life begins, and they're like already bored. They're like, I want that feeling back. And so they're going to keep trying to find someone to keep feeling that way. And when that wears off, they go to the next person. When that wears off, they go. I mean, it's everywhere. I see it often. And part of that is because in their default mode, they're not understanding the true capacity of love and commitment and trust and respect. Love is a fulfilling feeling and a fulfilling purpose, and it is action as well as a feeling. Some days, we're just ordinary people. We might not feel one way or the other. We might be in a bad mood or a good mood, but it doesn't mean you don't love the other person that you're with, or your family, or your children. It doesn't mean that. But for some people, it does mean that. Well, if I'm not feeling it, there's something wrong and I'm in the wrong place. So what are the instances where that can happen? I'm going to share a few types of difficulties or emotional issues in people that can create difficult bonding. I'll put it that way. Difficulty in even in friendships. Sometimes friends come and go because people aren't they can be iffy and make friendships and relationships very conditional. Now, this is, again, I hope you understand that if someone's being abusive or mean or controlling or violent, yeah, you don't want to be around people like that. That's a given. So I hope you understand that. But in our everyday life, if we're living continuously just by default, in other words, by anything that we grew up with by the age of 8, all the experiences, the things we were told to believe, the stories we made up in our head to believe about ourselves, about the world, about other people, and that gets embedded in us. And there's not a lot of lessons of learning by the time you're an adult. So you happen to be in a community that keeps people in that box, in that way of thinking. Some churches are like that. Political belief systems are like that, where they keep, you have no exposure to anything else. And this is all you know. And you think, oh, this is the way it is. And this is who I am. The real us, the true us, the beautiful us, the perfect us that still lives inside us is still there. It's trying to direct us differently and fight it, because our conscious awareness says, well, I can't believe that, or that's not right, or I'm supposed to be this way, or I'm supposed to be that way. And so there's like this tug of war within us, because honestly, we know that there's more in life. We know there's more to learn. We know that life is big and people are wonderful and cultures are different, and it shouldn't matter what color a person is or anything like that, or religion or whatever. Because when we're locked in and boxed in, not only with belief systems in our minds, but we're doing that to ourselves and our own personalities. And that gets old over time. It really does. And we want to break out of that. And I think that's why some people later in life just they just have been so boxed in for so long that they spring open like a jack in the box, and their behavior is, what is going on with them, But I think it's because they're trying to find themselves finally. Hopefully they'll have the wisdom on how to do that, and hopefully be guided to do it well through therapy or counselor or something, reading, whatever. But I want to just share some aspects of what trauma can do to us, to people. I did talk about codependency. I'll talk about it again within a relationship. But one of the things that you hear a lot of is the word trauma bonding in a relationship. I believe trauma bonding happens when you're very young, that pattern of trauma bonding. And how I see it played out is, here's a scenario. You have a mother who perhaps is suffering from some kind of mental illness, or maybe an addiction or something. But she's cruel and she's mean to the child. She's abusive to the child. She bullies the child, mean to them, hits them, whatever, ignores them, doesn't take care of them, is not nurturing. And yet that child needs their mother, right? When we're young, we need our parent Even if they're mean to us, there's a bond there. That bond is there as family. So we need our parent, no matter how they're treating us. And so there's like an ambivalence that builds up because we're afraid of them, but we know we also need them to help us sometimes. We do our best with coping mechanisms not to be involved with them, but there are times when we actually need them and we need their help. And there's trepidation there. And the trauma of being abused by them or hurt by them or bullied by them or ignored by them or whatever the issue is. There's the trauma, but we're bonded to them. And so there's a cycle here of needing them, wanting them, also as a child, desiring their love for us, desiring them, wanting them to want us. So there's that. So that is a trauma bond right there. That starts in childhood. Can it start in a relationship as an adult? It's possible. I think that could be possible. But I think more so it starts in childhood, and then that child is going to replicate, grow up and replicate, and eventually find a person that's going to replicate that trauma bonding. You want them, you think you love them, and they're treating you poorly, and they're hurting you, they're abusing you, or ignoring you. And then there's the makeup, of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And, and so you're bonded. There's this bond and there's trauma. There's bond and trauma, bond and trauma, bond and trauma. That is no way to live, and nor is it healthy at any cost or any means. That is not a way to live. But many people find themselves in that situation because they never, ever healed or recovered from their childhood trauma. They never got the help they needed. They never really resolved anything or understood the psychology of it or the emotions of it all. And so a lot of times when people, and it's very subconscious. It's not like you're thinking, oh, I'm going to find somebody who's going to be mean to me and I'm going to, fix them. No, it's a subconscious thing where when we do connect with somebody who reminds us of our childhood, subconsciously we want to fix it. We couldn't fix it as children. We couldn't fix our parent, but we're thinking we can fix this other person, and then they'll see the light will go on, and then they'll become very loving and kind to us, and everything will be wonderful. It doesn't. We know it doesn't work that way. It never works that way. I should never say never, but 99% of the time, it doesn't work that way. And so the trauma is relived, and it's not love. And there's a psychological component to some people feeling like when the bonding happens again, that it's love, and it's not love. It's a relief from the trauma. You love the relief of the angst and the arguing and the whatever, the bickering, the verbal abuse, maybe physical abuse. So it's not really love. It's just a sense of relief. But that's trauma bonding in my words. Other people might explain it differently, and I've heard other explanations, which makes sense. But to me, I do feel like it starts in childhood. I think a healthy adult wouldn't allow themselves to be in that kind of situation. I think a healthy adult, when I say healthy, I mean mentally and emotionally and socially, psychologically, pretty balanced. Not perfect, but balanced. They're not going to allow themselves to be in that kind of setup. They would recognize it right away and just end that relationship before it even began. So there's something within people who haven't resolved their issue, and they get involved in that kind of relationship. And it's again, a part of life. It's just saying, look, this is a classroom for you. This relationship is your classroom. Are you going to learn now? Because remember I said earlier, pain is our teacher, and sometimes that pain gets pretty bad before we go, oh, I got to do something about this. So, and sometimes some people never get to that point, which is unfortunate. But I think many of us do. We get to that point where it's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, something's got to change. I know that was like for me in my life many years ago. It was like, this cannot continue. I'm in too much pain, and something's got to give. And I didn't even know what it was until I really got into seeking out books and reading and finding out information and finally getting to therapy, like figuring it out. And I know that old habits are hard to break. And in our paradigms, a lot of habits, because beliefs are habit. A belief is something you just do over and over again, or think over and over again. And it becomes a habit, and you just have to learn to break it. So if we go to codependency, the codependent, and I shared about myself and my personality and how the trauma made me a perfect codependent. My mother was codependent, so I had it exampled for me. Just being that nice person. I wasn't very feisty. I had a lot of energy. I was energetic and played a lot and liked being outside and being with my friends. But I wasn't like feisty. Like some of my sisters are more outgoing, and they have, they're feisty and they're, passionate about things, but they're very emotionally passionate about. I can be passionate, but I might not exude it in an emotional way necessarily. And they're extroverts, and they're, so they handled life differently. Their coping mechanisms were different. But for me, or anybody who's codependent, it means you're dependent on somebody that you're trying to fix. You can't fix yourself. You don't even realize yourself needs healing and fixing. So we connect with somebody who might be addicted or have an illness or a disorder or something. And we're spending our time with so much care and concern for other people and a person that we don't take care of ourselves ever. We don't even think of it as that's something we should do. And the person we're trying to fix has no interest whatsoever in being changed at all. They don't want to, they don't want to recover. They love their alcohol. They love their drugs. They love their power plays, or they're locked in narcissism or a disorder that they don't even realize that they have. And the codependent is so lovingly and patiently trying to fix them. It doesn't work. It never works. That I can say never works. It just doesn't work. And oftentimes people with codependent tendencies will also be in careers of service, social workers and whatnot. And if they're not clear with their own self of healing and understanding their own trauma and why they're doing what they're doing, they burn out very quickly in their jobs because they haven't developed their own boundaries. They haven't realized that, yes, it's okay to be loving and serving and helping and doing all that, but you have to love and serve yourself. And you have to have your own boundaries. You have to be able to say no. You have to have your own time frame. You have to know yourself well enough to say, I can work 4 days in this industry, but I need a long weekend to recover so I can be fresh when I come back. Or whatever your boundaries are, because you know yourself well. It's really important to understand. So a relationship that is codependent is stifling. It doesn't work. People burn out. And the other person that you're trying to fix begins to resent you. That's not a relationship. It's so interesting how many of us in our default mode will get involved in relationships, and mostly because unconsciously we're just trying to fix what happened to us. We're trying to make it better as an adult. And we don't realize that's what we're doing. And it doesn't work. That's the sad thing. But it is a life lesson. If we can finally get to a point and go, oh gosh, what am I doing here? This isn't working. I'm wearing myself out. I'm not doing something right, I need to take responsibility for myself and get help. And that's when recovery can begin. It's not when we're blaming other people or pointing the finger at other people or saying, well, if they just did that, then I can be better or feel better or live better. It doesn't work that way because it's always an inside job. And then we have people who struggle with certain mental illnesses. And in this day and age, what I find pretty good is there's so much information and help and education and research that different kinds of mental illnesses can be helped with certain kinds of therapy and or medication if need be. And believe it or not, they're finding nutrition, food can cause healing in mental illness, believe it or not, or at least aid in it. The way we eat really affects our brain and our emotions and our hormones, because now we know so much more about our gut health, and our gut health is connected to the brain, that and you can look into that, I'm not going to do a whole thing on that, but our gut health, the gut biome, needs to be balanced well, because it definitely is connected to the brain and feeds the brain. And when that is off whack, our brain is out of whack as well. Also, we need to make sure we're hydrated throughout the day as well. And I think, there's a lot of information. We don't have to drink gallons and gallons of water. That's been debunked. But staying hydrated throughout the day. If we feel thirsty, we're already in a beginning in a dehydration mode, which immediately affects the brain. So just being mindful of, keeping water around you and sipping it throughout the day is really important, especially, on a hot day and you're outside and you're sweating. We need a lot more water. But keeping mentally fit is important. Sometimes in adulthood, things can happen where situational depression can occur. We go through something very difficult, a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job, or going through a divorce or something, and it can create depression. And we need help for that sometimes. Sometimes it can pass with having people to talk to, trusted friends, people who listen to you, and get through that episode of maybe 6 weeks, or so. If it's longer than that, obviously seek out help and get the help that one needs in depression. But we all go through kind of situational depression throughout our life at one time or another, and we get through it, and that's a good thing. And when we have a partner that understands that and loves us through that, it's all the more better. But when someone's struggling from a bipolar situation and mood swings are just all over, and this has been within my relatives, so I'm aware of what it looks like when someone's manic and they don't sleep much and they're on this constant high of energy, and then their thought process gets skewed and confused, and they might tend to go and just buy things. They don't have the money and they'll just go out and buy because it's that manic phase, and it fuels the feelings of manic. And then biologically, hormonally, something occurs and that shuts down, and then they fall into a depression. That can last quite a while, or it could bounce right back up to a manic phase. People are different. That's the thing. People really need to get help in that, because sometimes people can stay manic and be depressed for a short while, or be very depressed for a long while and then hit the manic phase. And I know that there's certain therapies and certain medications that can help people, and that they can live very well in life, and they can be in a good relationship, and they know what their emotional triggers are in order to go seek help that they might need. But in a relationship, if that is unchecked and they've not been diagnosed, but they've had this illness, it can be devastating in a relationship, as you can understand why. So being as healthy as we can to enter a relationship, and we're always going to be growing and learning and changing and developing in our life. But if we are aware to the best of our ability at the time that we're in, especially young people, early 20s, mid 20s, when they're serious about somebody, I wish there was more information on helping people be having this personal growth and development and understanding and awareness so that they can be the best they can be. They can love themselves, they can love their life, and they can partner with somebody in such a balanced, loving way with another partner who's balanced. And understand, and communication is open and honest. I know it sounds ideal, but that's what it takes to have a good relationship. And to form a relationship, like I said, I think I said it on Monday, it takes a good couple of years really to get to know somebody well and to see them in different aspects of their life. And it kind of gives us a look into who they are. Like I said, if there's somebody who's impatient on the road, I wouldn't make an excuse for that. Once in a while you're in a hurry and you have to get to an emergency, I get it. But I mean, if it's a constant thing and they have this hidden kind of road rage, or they're flipping people off, or they're not kind to the people who wait on them in a store or at a restaurant, that tells you something about their character, because character matters. And we're going to be talking about that in another episode, but character truly matters. And so somebody who has flaws in their character, and that could be for different reasons. It could be because of a disorder, maybe through narcissism, or they're entitled or feel arrogant, like they're just entitled. That's a very immature attitude. And I don't know if we can't make excuses for that. And a lot of people I've seen over the years, they're so infatuated with this other person. And I say infatuated because if you remember, I said we will cling on to somebody, we'll look at somebody and think, oh, they're so this, or why, oh, this is amazing. I got to meet them. I'm going to date them. I'm going to go out with them. And we build this story in our head about how it's going to be. And it's usually about how it's going to be for me. How are they going to make me feel? How are they going to make me look? That's not love. That's infatuation. So people will build these stories about another person, and they'll make excuses for their bad behavior. And then they are in a committed relationship and get married or live together, and that erodes. Those rose-colored glasses start fading, and you're like, oh gosh, how did I not see that before? The key parts of a relationship are shown in the beginning. And it can't all be 100% chemistry. Because if that's what you have, that fades. We all know it's not like you can't have wonderful times, but just that initial fireworks every time you see each other kind of thing, that eventually fades. And we settle into life. And remember, a healthy way of living is accepting, we're living in the balance of life. We have good days, we have celebrations, we have fun times, all the good stuff. And then we have times that are difficult. Like I mentioned, situational depression, or losing a job, or losing a loved one, or dealing with older parents. You're in charge of having to take care of your parents who are elderly. That can come into play. So there are all these different ways that if we're not healthy in the balance of life, it's going to be really difficult when emergencies come into play, because we have to have our wits about us and maintain a good mental health. And there's nothing wrong with struggling with mental health. Everybody does at one time or another, and that shouldn't be an embarrassment. It shouldn't be a stigma at all, ever. And I'm glad to see, I'm hoping, or at least I am glad to see that over my lifetime, I've seen that stigma kind of fading away, which I'm very glad for, because everybody's going to have some difficulty with their mental health at some time or another. And it could be a simple short-term times, a couple times throughout life, or maybe long-term, and you just need extra help. You know, when we break an arm, we go to the hospital and they reset it and they put it in a cast and it heals. Sometimes we just need that extra help, and that's fine. I don't want anybody ever to feel embarrassed about mental health issues. We don't feel embarrassed when we get sick, or if we need braces, or if we break an arm. I mean, we get the help we need, right? So I hope people don't feel embarrassed about that ever, because we all need it at some time or another. I know I did. I suffered terrible depression that I had shared with you when my children were younger. And then going through my divorce was very, very difficult. And that depression was not easy. I was thankful for the help that I got too, which was really good. So don't ever feel shy or embarrassed to get the help you need, because it's important to do so. And you'll feel better. You'll feel better more quickly than waiting. So that's my public service announcement, I guess. But I mean it. I think that's important to understand. This is another very important thing that I want to share real quickly, is our attachment styles. Again, it goes back to childhood. If we're from a decent family, we have a decent upbringing, and our parents love us, and we know we're loved, and they protected us and offered us empathy when we needed it, and guided us well, and just a typical well-rounded family. And you admired your father, you loved your mother, and let's say you're a little girl. I'm going to put it this way: you're a young girl, and your father was so loving toward you and unconditional, and cared for you and guided you well, and along with your mother too. But I'm just going to talk about heterosexual here in this framework of a relationship. That young girl is going to grow up to know she's valued by the most important man in her life when she was young, which was her father. So she will already have kind of a healthy outlook on what to expect and what to feel in a relationship, and what to look for in a mate, someone to commit to, because she knows she's valued and she's worthwhile, and she has good esteem, and her father has built that into her. So that's a given, and that's good for her. It's a good way to start out life when you're an adult, especially if you're a woman. And I know that sounds stereotypical, and I know that's generalizing. I just want to say I know that that's what it sounds like, because many people are from single homes, and it's the mother that raises them. And okay, it still can be built in if it's talked about a lot, or maybe there's a special uncle that can treat that child well, and that she has a good version of a healthy, balanced man, an adult man in her life. That's all I'm saying. And vice versa for a man, for a young boy and a mother. Same way, same thing. So I think that's important to understand. We start out a certain way, and you have a good, healthy attachment. Now, again, if we go back to the abusive attachments, like the ones I talked about, where there's ambivalence, where there's fear, where there's even loathing, you can't stand your one parent who's so abusive because you don't understand as a child that they're alcoholic, or they're addicted, or they have a disorder. That sticks with you. And there's a certain unhealthy understanding of an attachment, again, in a heterosexual relationship, for the opposite sex. It can be very, if you're living by default, again, if that has never been addressed and you don't understand that this is playing within you, then what's going to happen is your attachment style to your opposite sex parent is going to be similar if that hasn't been helped in you, that you haven't recovered from or understood. You know, some women are like, oh, all men suck. I hate them. They're terrible. And that is their mindset because that's how they grew up. That's how they believed men to be. Or boys growing up thinking, oh, all women are horrible and mean and they're terrible and they're alcoholics or they're bitchy or they're moody, whatever words you want to put to it. That's a very unfortunate way for any of us to see life, for any of us to see another person. That needs help. That needs to be addressed as an adult. And I just want to say, if you've had a difficult relationship with one of your parents in life, talk it out with somebody. Really, even if it's just a couple sessions with a counselor or a therapist, or read some good books on the topic, because no, not all men are horrible, cheaters, hateful, mean, abusers. They're not. And not all women are mean and bitchy and horrible and are out to get your money or just use you and use sex. They're not. But it's understandable how that paradigm, that belief system is developed if that was your situation growing up. In attachment disorders and attachment difficulties, you can only imagine what's going to happen in the adult years when we're wanting to love and be loved, when we're wanting that special person in our life. We're unconsciously and subconsciously going to pick the very person that we don't want. It's just the way it goes. And it's unfortunate, but it's also the way I like to turn this around is an opportunity for us to learn, because it's going to become painful. And usually we're going to blame the other person. And we forget or not even acknowledge that we played a part in that relationship. Why did I pick that person? What was it about me? What was I thinking? All the red flags were there. Why did I ignore them? These are questions we need to ask ourselves, not judge it, but just be curious. And then seek help for yourself, because you want to be balanced. You want to be healthy. You want to love yourself. We're going back to loving yourself. When we love ourselves, respect ourselves, connect with our higher self, and that is that spiritual, beautiful perfection that's within us. It's not religion. There is that component in us, I call it our spiritual DNA, that is there. And we need to take time to nurture ourselves in that higher self of ours. A lot of clarity can be had there, and a lot of wisdom. And it grows us up and it grows our soul. And we can walk in life in self-confidence and with our heads held high, knowing, yes, we have our vulnerabilities, knowing, yes, there are things that we would like to do better or get rid of that weakness or strengthen that weakness within us, whatever it may be. But to do it with self-respect and love, not judgment, not be down on yourself or criticize yourself, that's the worst thing we can do. We don't like it when people criticize us or put us down. So we shouldn't be doing it to ourselves. And hopefully gives us a perspective of not to do it to other people. People who are bullies loathe themselves. I'm not excusing their behavior at all, but just to give an understanding that people who are awful to other people, yes, it needs to be attended to, there needs to be consequences, but it's coming from a place of self-loathing usually. It really is. And again, I want to talk about mental stability. I want to talk about mental health a little bit and disorders, because I think that's important. I know I mentioned that. I'm trying to think when to do that. Maybe I can do that on Monday, and then Friday talk about living by default as opposed to living on purpose, because those are very important understanding. It's very important to understand in our life. And you know, all these things I'm sharing and talking about, they come at different times for different people. Like, I know for me, I had awareness of some things, but it wasn't until the aha moment in my life, that thought, and I went, okay, oh, that's what that, okay, now I get it. So I know everybody's timing is different. But what I'm hoping and sharing is giving information that will last, so that when that aha moment occurs, you can go, oh, I remember she said that. Oh, don't judge myself and don't be critical of myself, but to love myself and get the help I need. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't want anybody to beat up on themselves, but just get the help you need if you need it. That's all. We all need help at one time or another in our lives. Again, whether it's through a good friend, a minister or a religious person in your life, or a counselor or a therapist. We all need help at one point or another, and that's okay. This life is not easy to get through. And we do need one another. Sometimes it does take a village, not only to raise a child, but just for support. They can't fix us. They can't rescue necessarily. I'm not saying that, but just for support. And I bet you've been supportive to other people as well. You've been a good listening ear. You've been maybe able to offer some good help or advice. And we all need each other that way, one time or another. And if we can be open and honest with one another in a loving way, so much more can get done, that we don't take offense or be defensive. Because that's a paradigm. That's something that we had to learn. That was a coping mechanism in our life that we learned young. And if we can use the brain God gave us, along with our heart and the wisdom, we can be more balanced, and we can love ourselves the way we are. Everybody's different. Everybody has different abilities. Everybody has a different personality, and it's kind of fun. I love my friends. They're awesome, and they're different, and their personalities are different, and yet somehow we all get along. We laugh, we can cry together, laugh together. We can, it's like we're different, but we all get along, because there's that base of awareness, of love and respect. We don't come from a sense of self-defense or offense, being offended. We just come in love. And if there's something to talk about, we talk about it with one another. And that's the best part. So that is that's what I wanted to share today. And I know there's more, and all this can go deeper, but those I know you can do your own research and you can look up things yourself, which is fine. But if you have questions, you can always ask me at info.maryalice@gmail.com. You can just, ask a question. The other I have a list here, but I know our time is getting low. But the other thing was addiction. When your spouse or your partner develops an addiction. Maybe it wasn't present beforehand, but sometimes in adult years, people can develop alcoholism or an addiction because they haven't dealt with the pain within them. And so that's the best way to kill pain, is to use something. Some people use other people. You know, sex addicts do that. They use another person through the means of sex because they get that high quickly, but then it wears off quickly, and then they have to go find another partner. It could be sex, it could be food, it could be alcohol or pills. It doesn't matter. Whatever kills, whatever we want to ignore that pain, we're going to try and find another way to cover it up. So that is a serious thing. And being in partnership with someone like that is very difficult. It does take help. And I would suggest that I know has helped a lot of people, and even helped me in my life at one time, is Al-Anon. Because you have AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which helps alcoholics and addicts. And Al-Anon helps the person who is may have a family member or their partner who is addicted. That's a really good group to join if that's a part of you, and you feel like you're being heard. You're also getting educated, and it's all confidential, like AA is. And I know I benefited greatly when I was going to Al-Anon in that time of my life. And I also met some awesome people. So there's a resource for you in case you know somebody or yourself who's struggling with a family member or a spouse who is addicted, and they're not getting help, and they don't want help, and they're just, you see your loved one going down the tubes. That's heartbreaking. So get the help you need. And Al-Anon is a great start. And there are groups all over the country. And again, they're confidential. Just show up, sit in a meeting, listen to what people are saying. And the more you go and the more you learn, you can gain more peace of mind. And also lose the codependent part of you that you're just frantically trying to fix this person, because you can't. And it's heartbreaking. I know, it's heartbreaking when you see a loved one going down the tubes that way. But what's worse is when you're hurting yourself by not getting the help you need. So I just want to leave that as a resource. And there are other things. I mean, you can also see a counselor or whatever, but that's a good place to start. So I want to leave that with you. Thank you for listening. And I know there are other things on here, but our time is limited. And I hope and trust this is helpful. And again, if you have questions. So Monday, I think what I'll do is spend time talking about what is a personality disorder, and what does it mean when someone has a personality disorder? Because I think it's very important to know that all of us struggle, all of us will come across somebody in life who has a personality disorder. So what we need to do is understand it and know how to not be involved with certain people. So thanks so much. And I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you Friday. And remember how amazing you are as a human being. We are so amazing. And you're a miracle on this planet. You're a walking miracle, walking, talking, breathing miracle. And you matter so much. And I appreciate you being here. And I thank you. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. See you Monday.